What's up, everybody? Welcome in to another episode with the lawyer you know here, and we're breaking down more of the P. Diddy situation. His lawyers have made some public comments about the raid, and we're going to look into some of the comments they've made about some of the civil cases because I think that'll shed some light on their position, their plan, how confident they may be or lack thereof, and whether we agree with some of those statements or not. What kind of a position are they taking publicly? Because we know that a lot of this is going to take place publicly. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about, his alleged drug mule being arrested with drugs on him and charged with some potential drug charges. And, the treatment of his kids at his house. And we can talk about the raid and all that stuff. Again, people are asking if I'm sick. It's pollen season in Florida, and it has literally hit me in the face, so my nose does not stop running. But we also have my dad here to come on the show today as well and answer your questions, because on the Diddy video that we did yesterday, breaking down the raid, why it happened, where they were in the investigation or where we think they are in the investigation, what potential charges are, what happens from here, there were a ton of questions that came in. So we wanted to take a second, answer some of those live after we go through his lawyer's statement. So make sure you guys hit the like button. Thank you for being here, for hanging out, for asking these questions, for bringing the content. I'm going to welcome my dad in now. Hello, Father.
Hello.
We're going to start out by reading the, I had it queued up. By reading the statement made publicly about the search by P. Diddy's lawyer, and kind of see where we agree or disagree with some of the things that he said. So it starts out, yesterday there was a gross overuse of military level force as search warrants were executed at Mr. Combs's residence. So this is a criminal defense attorney who is going to handle this federal case for all intents and purposes. And so we think, so with that first line, do you agree or disagree with that? Because you kind of thought maybe it was a little overboard yesterday, especially the armored vehicles, even though potentially there's a past or a history of some violent behavior or weapons, drugs, things like that. Do you think it was a gross overuse of military level force?
I guess how you define gross. I think that they did use quite a bit. I thought the armored vehicle was a nice touch. But the fact that they had a lot of people there with big guns, that doesn't offend me. That is something they probably needed to do to make sure they had an overwhelming show of force so that no one would give them any trouble. But this first sentence is just a red herring, has nothing to do with guilt or innocence. It's just to get people's attention away from really what's going on and to try to blame the government for doing something improper.
And I think it also has a little tinge of they're just going on this witch hunt and they're going to try to make P. Diddy look bad. And, this is all just they targeted him and they're going after him because he's a celebrity, because, maybe people have said stuff about him, but in reality, they just want to get him because he's a big fish. To me, and they want it all to play out in the court of public opinion. I think there's a lot of hints of that in these comments. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And, it's the same thing I would have done. Frankly, if I represented P. Diddy, I would have done the same thing in that first sentence. I would have tried to put the attention on the government misconduct and away from my client.
So the second sentence is, there is no excuse for the excessive show of force and hostility exhibited by authorities or the way his children and employees were treated. So we know that they were taken out of the house. I believe they were put in handcuffs. I don't think they were arrested, were they?
No, they were not arrested. They were the two sons. I think they're like 30 and 25.
Yeah.
They were put in handcuffs.
And is there anything wrong with that? Do you take issue with that? So that was for safety reasons. So law enforcement was making sure they were safe and they couldn't destroy any evidence.
Absolutely. Yeah. It happens quite a bit.
But also, when you talk about gross misconduct, and what does gross mean? In civil law, gross negligence, things like that, shock the system, are above and beyond, are recklessly disregarding human safety, human life. So if you want to start painting the picture that the government did overstep or used excessive force, calling them kids or children, and saying and showing that they were handcuffed outside the house and showing that picture or video, I think does start to move that narrative forward.
Right. Yeah. Because people in people's minds, they're not 30 and 25, they're 15.
Say that again.
In people's minds, we're not talking about a 30-year-old and a 25-year-old. We're talking about a 10-year-old, but
Right.
really they're 30 and 25.
And also to think of anybody that's not a criminal being handcuffed and removed from their houses, I think does shock the system a little bit, even if there are exigent circumstances or reasons for it during a search of this kind.
All right.
Mr. Combs was never detained, but spoke to and cooperated with authorities. So that's the first time that was confirmed. We kind of hinted at this or figured that this would be the case, that they were not surprised by these quote unquote raids and that there was some cooperation. But it's pretty interesting to think that Mr. Combs spoke to authorities.
Well, and I read that, and I'm not sure whether that was something that came before these raids, or I don't know if you saw the video of the Opelika airport, but where his private jet landed, he talked to law enforcement at the Opelika airport when they arrested his friend. So they may be talking about the fact that he cooperated with law enforcement at the airport.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like that. To me, it sounds like he spoke with and cooperated them prior to this. I don't know, though. And it also says he cooperated, and that could mean through his lawyer. But
right.
The way I read it, it sounds like Diddy is potentially talking to authorities, which would be really interesting, but also not unusual in a case like this, right? Why don't you talk about for a second what happens before charges are filed, especially in federal court? If you represent a high-profile, wealthy individual as a criminal defendant, it's not uncommon that you'll meet with law enforcement and talk to them and try basically to get them not to file charges. What is that process like?
Well, first, it's absolutely correct. You get in there early and you get in there quick. And before they've had a chance to really, hopefully, come up with an opinion and gather a lot of evidence. You get in there quick. You try to convince them that it's not worth the effort, it's not worth the money, and it's not worth their time. First, you try to meet with the agents. And a lot of times the agents won't meet with you. Then you have to meet with an assistant U.S. attorney because the assistant U.S. attorney is supposed to meet with you and try to convince him. If you can't convince that, then you go up the chain, you go up to supervisors and try to talk to them. If you've got all the assets and all the money and the profile that this person has, that Diddy has, then you're going to get the meetings you want to get to talk to them. They're going to want to meet with you for two reasons. One, they want to make sure they don't make a mistake. Or two, they want to see if they can get some information from you that's going to be damaging so that they can use it against you later. One or the other, they're going to meet with you and they give you an opportunity to talk them out of it.
Yeah, and I think that from P. Diddy's perspective and from the criminal defense perspective, you also might want to point them in another direction if you can. You might want to, as the lawyer, explain why they have a weak case and kind of what we talked about yesterday a little bit. If you shoot, you better not miss kind of deal, right? When you're talking kind of like Alec Baldwin's lawyers did the same thing in his case, and they want to embarrass you publicly if you come after a high-profile client and you miss and you're wrong. Well, they're never going to let you forget about it. They're going to sue you because it's going to affect their career. It's going to affect their money, millions and maybe even $1 billion when we're talking about a billionaire like P. Diddy. So sometimes you add that pressure in the nicest way possible before charges are filed because your goal is to not have them file charges or file the least severe charges possible.
Well, and plus, again, what you can use in this case, again, two-edged sword with regard to those civil suits. You use that civil suit and say, look, it's obvious these people are saying this because they want to make money. They're trying to use the government as a sword against my client to make them money. It's extortion. You don't want to be part of this extortion government. Leave this alone. Let it work out in the civil courts.
And even if he's paid money, there's no admission there. And, more on that coming later.
Right.
Brooklyn Basement, yes, the civil suits are absolutely wild. We talked about the Cassie one on another video earlier. You can check that out on our channel. We're going to talk a little bit about them later today with some of the lawyers' other comments. Despite media speculation, neither Mr. Combs nor any of his family members have been arrested, nor has their ability to travel been restricted in any way. That's something that we commented on yesterday. And again, this is something as a criminal defense lawyer you can use to make your client look innocent at this point, right? It's like he hasn't been arrested. He hasn't even had any travel restrictions. But
it's
again,
a presumption of innocence. He's presumed innocent.
But what this doesn't mean, and what there is no guarantee of, is that he won't be arrested in the future, or that members of his family or his crew might not be arrested in the future, right?
Right. And we know that one of the members of his crew was arrested at Opa-locka Airport.
Right. And I don't know how far those connections go with those charges, if it's just possession charges at this point, just regarding him.
It's just possession of drugs, and it was inside his bag. But the reason they looked at his bag was the Rodney Jones lawsuit, where alleged that this person, Mr. Paul, was a mule that carried guns and drugs for Combs. So that's the reason they checked that bag. And sure enough, they found drugs and they arrested him.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really interesting. And again, everything that happens that starts to prove those civil lawsuits true is going to affect the criminal case. Shy Gal said, Papa T, how far back will they go? I may be off, but can they go all the way back to Biggie?
Well, yes and no. Yes, they can go back to Biggie. There's normally no statute of limitations on murder.
Right.
And they've done away with the statute in a lot of cases with regards to sex trafficking. So yes, they can go pretty far back. Some of these lawsuits, remember, are in the late 90s, these allegations. So that shows you how far back, even in the civil lawsuits, we're going.
And again, if you want to check out a similar case that it looks like it's running kind of parallel to this, the R. Kelly case that we broke down, that was a federal case, multiple jurisdictions, is pretty similar to this. Beach Rando said, is P. Diddy still MIA? I haven't seen that they've picked him up anywhere. Have you?
No, and there's apparently they don't know where he is, but they believe he's still in the country. Again, if you talk about the speculation that you can read in the press, it looks like he's still in the country.
All right, back to the statement. This unprecedented ambush, paired with an advanced coordinated media presence, leads to a premature rush to judgment of Mr. Combs and is nothing more than a witch hunt based on meritless accusations made in civil lawsuits. So he calls the civil lawsuits meritless accusations. And he says not only was this, excessive use of force wrong and horrible, but also the connected media attention that it's getting in the rush to judgment. How does that work from a U.S. attorney or Homeland Security or these raids? How does it work with their involvement with the media? Do they talk to the media? Is there a concerted effort? Do they try to control the narrative? How does that work?
Well, that sentence has several parts. And so if you deal with the part with the media, we're normally not supposed to call the media. But let's face it, how many times have we seen that? I mean, it just happens coincidentally. There's media there when the armored vehicle actually pulls in. I saw the shot where they actually see the armored vehicle pulling in. I mean, they had to have been there in advance. The helicopters are overhead already when they're doing the raid. There were some leaks here, but it's happened before, and it's going to happen again. That's not too again such a surprise with a high-profile case like this. It's sad, because they really shouldn't try to be smearing the person that's presumed innocent in the press. But the government likes publicity like anybody else.
Yeah,
but there is a second part.
If they can start the narrative going the right way, they're gonna. Because again, they don't want to lose. They don't want to misstep. They don't want to drop the ball in this case for sure. Also, I would say this is not unprecedented, but it is unusual. And I think for lay people or people in the media that are seeing something like this for the first time, I don't think it's overstepping too much calling it unprecedented as a criminal defense attorney.
Criminal defense attorney, of course, unprecedented, or you can call it almost never done. But again, it is done.
Right.
There's a little wordsmithing going on here when you start talking about this stuff, but it happens all the time.
And even more right here, there has been no finding of criminal or civil liability with any of these allegations. Is that true and correct? Yes. But they can't just come search my house and say I've been running a sex trafficking ring, because they've got no evidence of it. So there is something there. Has he been charged? Has he been arrested? Have there been any findings? Absolutely not. But again, this is a statement by a criminal defense lawyer to say his client is innocent when time will tell. Because here's the problem with saying something like this. When there are findings by a court, maybe for probable cause, or an indictment by a grand jury, now there are findings of probable cause that he committed a crime. So does that make him guilty? No. But trying to say that there are no findings at this point makes him not guilty, invites that type of conversation. Same thing with civil. If he were to go to civil court, we've had cases where criminal defense clients have lost civil trials and then won the criminal trial. And you may say, how's that possible? Well, there's a different burden. In a civil trial, it's 51%, more likely than not, greater weight of the evidence. But in a criminal case, it is beyond a reasonable doubt, the highest burden in the United States. So to put this much clout in civil findings, to me, again, could be a dangerous line to walk. But at this point, it's evidence that's good on your side that you can say to try to fight the narrative and show no civil or criminal findings. My client's innocent, and you guys are all convicting him in the court of public opinion.
Well, I tell you, and the next phrase here, based
we're going to read the last one in a second.
Okay.
Do you have anything else to say about the fact that he said no criminal and civil liability? I'll just read it now and you can combine them. Mr. Combs is innocent and will continue to fight every single day to clear his name.
Standard language.
So what do you think about the fact that he brought up no criminal and civil findings at this point?
Well, what I bring up is I can tell you in a majority of search warrants, there is an indictment that goes along. You execute the search warrant and you arrest the person at the same time you execute the search warrant. So there is a probable cause finding by a grand jury. This one, because it's a little bit, again, it happens all the time, but it is a little bit unusual because normally you will have an indictment that goes along with a federal search warrant. But in this case, he's right. And I think people should give him the presumption of innocence.
Absolutely. I think it's great evidence for them at this point that, all these civil lawsuits that he's settling, there's no findings made. It's all confidential. There's no admission of liability. There's no admission of fault or guilt or anything like that. And so he can still say things like this, even if he's paying all these civil lawsuits.
Right.
T.R. Finley asked, can they restrict his travel at this point?
No. They cannot restrict his travel unless he's arrested.
Until he's arrested. Right.
Right. They cannot restrict his travel.
Now, what's interesting, and like what happened in the Donna Adelson case, if he does board a flight or his plane is set up to go out of the country to some, non-extradition country, that could speed up their process and their timeline and potentially try to move faster on his arrest so he can't get out, which happened to her. But again, at this point, no arrest, no indictment. They can't restrict his travel.
Right.
He's a free citizen, not guilty of any crime.
Right.
You bet. What about the predicate acts in a RICO? Not sure if that's the right wording. Do you think that they're going to try to build up some predicate acts and make this RICO similar to the R. Kelly case?
Well, I would think they would. And it makes sense to try to make this a RICO if they can. They have a wonderful RICO requires an organization. And they have a great organization, and that was called Bad Boy, I believe was the name of the
multiple things. Yeah.
Yeah. So they have a great organization.
But the problem with Bad Boy is it has a legitimate purpose. Sorry to interrupt, but the Bad Boy has a legitimate purpose that's very easily definable that R. Kelly's, RICO group organization did not.
Well,
so I think they'd have to find something else other than Bad Boys.
No, that's one of the fallacies that people believe that a lot. Because the RICO statute was written for the mafia, that's the reason they wrote it. Professor Blakely wrote it from Notre Dame because they were having trouble getting the mafia bosses. So everybody presumes it's got to be like a mafia. But the majority of RICO cases now, the organizations have both a legitimate and an illegitimate purpose. So it's not unusual to have an organization with a legitimate purpose that's the organization in the RICO. It happens a lot.
The only thing I would say is just based on the language and the documents in R. Kelly's case, it would have to read much differently than R. Kelly's case did, because that was one of the major things from their cases. It was just like a front and didn't actually have anything to do with the music business and wasn't really connected to all these other people like I think Bad Boy would. But maybe it will be RICO, maybe it not, maybe it's not. It seems like
wouldn't you love? I would love to have a RICO case where the organization's name was Bad Boy.
Well,
I mean, come on. You can imagine arguing the jury, ladies and gentlemen, the jury. This organization is Bad Boy. I mean, it's made for RICO.
Yeah, and honestly, like the reason RICO to me, and you tell me what you think about this. Do you think RICO would be the scariest crime they could charge as the criminal defense lawyer? Like, would you rather them charge specifically trafficking and, sex trafficking or weapons or drugs or whatever, something else? To me, RICO opens the door up to so many other things, making them potentially relevant. for them to just pile on like they did to R. Kelly and make him look like a horrible person, to where it's like, what did they actually prove? I don't know, but we can't let this guy go free.
Absolutely. Yeah. RICO is scary because of how broad it is. And it was deliberately designed to be that way. Again, it's being used for, in a lot of areas for what it was not designed for initially. But because it was written so broadly, they're using it for everything.
Right. And I can't tell you how many times during the R. Kelly case and litigation, it's like, well, this has to do with the organization, or this sheds light on the connections between these people and the criminal activity that they did way back when that has nothing to do with, sex trafficking or anything else, but they get it in. Whitney asked, what if nothing is found from the raids? Do they have to disclose that to the public? I can answer this one because there's another one you can answer. No, so they won't disclose that they found nothing or if they found certain things. How we'll know is if no charges filed or no charges follow, then we can obviously infer that they didn't find enough to indict Puff Daddy on these charges. Jenny asked, what would they need to arrest him and how long would it take to get possible evidence? What do you think?
Well, okay, obviously arrest is probable cause. The dream in this case is to find the videos. You find the videos where you actually have a video of him committing these crimes, or at least a video that backs up the statements of the victims. That's all they're going to need to arrest him. But I think if they arrest him, I think they're going to pile on. They're not going to take a chance of a weak case. They're going to make this case as strong as they can. That's why they're going to have a real strong case when they charge him, if they charge him.
Right.
It's going to be strong.
If they charge him. And that's the point of doing this before the indictment.
Right.
Jenny said, how long do you think before we see him arrested and what would they need? So that was kind of a question we already answered. Are NDAs null and void if they're required to testify? Should it go to court? Ginger said. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but you can answer it again now.
Yeah, you can't enforce those in criminal court. There's a public policy situation where you can't contract somebody to not testify about a criminal act. That just wouldn't make sense. And the public policy is you can't do that.
John said, what's Papa T's favorite Diddy song? I'll be missing you. All about the Benjamins. Thanks for your input.
I've got to be honest with you. I probably can't give you a favorite Diddy song.
I've got too many to name. He doesn't have any. What's the difference? What is RICO? Lisa said. Give a quick overview of RICO.
RICO is, again, racketeering, influence, corrupt organization. That's what those letters stand for. And what it is you've got an organization, a group. It can be formal or informal. It can be a corporation, just a group of people, and they're formed for the purpose of committing crimes. And technically, you've got to have multiple criminal acts that are designed by the corporation. So the group gets together and they decide we're going to be drug traffickers. So they commit multiple racketeering acts. In other words, 5 or 6 different smugglings, all based on the same organization operating. Again, the mafia is a classic example of the organization, and the organization commits multiple crimes. It doesn't have to be one kind of crime. It can be prostitution, drug dealing, racketeering,
trafficking.
They do a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and again, R. Kelly is a good example of that as well. They did underage stuff, all sorts of things.
Yeah, so it has to be just multiple crimes committed pursuant to the operation of an organization.
Ashley asked, do you think that the law written needs change for RICO because it's too broad?
I disagree sometimes with the way they use RICO.
I agree.
Because I think it was designed for, again, the mafia type cases. But on the other hand, there are some cases that wouldn't happen. Some people that wouldn't get prosecuted who need to be prosecuted if we didn't have RICO. So it's kind of a balance. I think maybe you could write RICO or make some tweaking, but you definitely need to have RICO in order to accomplish those purposes.
Key said, do you think they seized his bank accounts, bank records? Does he have access to his money? So he definitely has access to his money right now.
Right.
But
yeah,
what
they
would
may
it
have subpoenaed? They may have subpoenaed his bank records. And that's a definite possibility, and I think it'd be foolish if they didn't. So my guess is they have subpoenaed the bank records.
And what would it take for them to actually seize or freeze his money?
They'd have to have probable cause that the money was either related to criminal activity or was the proceeds from criminal activity, or was going to actually conduct criminal activity out of the proceeds of those bank accounts.
And I would say if they move forward on some of the charges that we're expecting or RICO, that's a very high likelihood of having that connection.
They would, but they would have to segregate, because I mean, he made a lot of legitimate money
Right.
too.
Absolutely.
So they would have to have a way of segregating. This money came from illegal activity. This money did not.
And especially because he's just sold off his interests in a couple businesses, like we mentioned
Right.
yesterday.
That's going to be a tough one for them to segregate. What they might do is they may say X amount of dollars, and he may put up that money, or put a bond up. And if he gets arrested, they may have a bond amount geared toward how much they think was illegal activity.
Brooklyn said, how common is it for everyone in a criminal network to go to prison and the boss go free in a RICO case? Do they need the boss for RICO?
That's not supposed to happen. Bosses do cooperate, but there's supposed to be levels. Let's say you have 10 people in an indictment. The boss is at the top, then you have 2 lieutenants, and the rest are just street people. Well, the boss might get a break, but he still should go to prison, just not as much of a break. The lower level people, maybe they can get off by cooperating. But a boss, give them a benefit for cooperating, but a boss should always go to prison.
It's a Wildlife said, question, I love your banter. If your dad was a prosecutor and Peter would Peter be allowed to go against him as a lawyer?
No.
Civilly,
that wouldn't happen.
Probably could if we were at different firms. Civilly, we probably could, but not as
we
not
could,
as a prosecutor.
In the criminal case, they would never let that.
Or a judge. Yeah, judge either. Caitlin, wouldn't items confiscated under the search warrant be subject to Foya? No. They're not public record, what they find if they don't file charges and stuff like that. So no. Thank you, Love, for gifting 10 memberships. All right, let's bring in now the next article. I wanted to just kind of look through.
You stopped short of one sentence where you said these were based on the civil cases.
Yeah, I read that.
Okay, well, because I wanted to make a comment about that.
Okay, I already X'd out of that window.
Well,
so go ahead.
That's why. That is the one mistake I think the criminal defense lawyer made. He gave us the basis for the search warrant. We could speculate, people can speculate all they want about what the search warrant was about, what was in it, what were they looking for? Well, we really don't know. Well, when he said it's based on the civil cases, that told everybody what it was about and based on. And I think that was a mistake, because now we know what it is they're looking at and who the subject of that search warrant was. And I think that was a mistake. And I wanted to comment on that.
Yeah. And while all of us probably knew and understood that that's where it came from, what I also think it does is gives credence to the victims that law enforcement talked to them and believed their story enough to at least take these steps.
Right.
Thanks, Azam, for the super sticker. Bella Vita asked, why do you think the private jet owner, assuming Sean Combs, wanted a flight record removed from tracking the same day as the raids? I don't know, but it's pretty hard to just like disappear in a jet. I'm not positive what this question is asking, but it's pretty hard to disappear in a jet, even if you're Sean Puff Daddy Combs. All right. Now we're going to bring up this article. I thought this picture was interesting of the armored vehicle coming in that we've mentioned before. It absolutely looks like it's going into a war zone, not a multi-million-dollar mansion. All right. And so I just want to read it. It gives us kind of an idea of some of the civil lawsuits and also some comments made by Diddy's team about those lawsuits. Accused of sexual misconduct in 5 separate lawsuits. Cassie, we broke that one down. They settled. And the comment was, the decision to settle this suit was in no way an admission of wrongdoing, an attorney for Puff Daddy said. His decision to settle the lawsuit does not in any way undermine his flat-out denial of the claims. He is happy they got to a mutual settlement and wishes Ms. Ventura the best. So again, that leaves the door open for them to comment that no wrongdoing, deny liability. That's probably part of the settlement, as he said, I'll pay you even more money so that I can still publicly deny these claims. Right?
Right. Well, we put the same wording in some of our agreements that,
sure.
That, no, you can't make any disparaging comments. You can't say anything bad about the other person. We'll pay you X amount of dollars. So I'm sure that was all in the agreement.
In court filings, Combs formally denied the allegations made in the December lawsuit. And again, that sounds like a big deal. Every response and answer to every complaint denies everything, right? I mean, they go through
Right.
each paragraph. We've looked at some civil complaints before on the show. Denied, 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 denied. And that's considered a formal denial. Even if you pay the next day, you've still formally denied. He told the court the lawsuit should be dismissed because the woman's decision to wait more than 2 decades to file her complaint has prejudiced him and he has lost the ability to defend himself fairly. What's interesting about that is that's not really a denial. That's saying she waited too long and now I've been prejudiced because I can't get my evidence. It is a denial and he's still denying it, but I'm saying using legal loopholes and procedures, which is appropriate and how it should be done because things need to be done by the rules, is interesting to put here in black and white and to see. Sometimes that can make it seem like, well, maybe he's not even really denying it. Just saying she did it the wrong way or at the wrong time. He also argued the evidence may now be unavailable, lost, or compromised, and that witness identification, availability, and recollections are likely compromised due to substantial passing of time. All of this is very, very standard language. It's the reason we have statute of limitations in a lot of states and a lot of kinds of cases. They've done away with them or gone loose on them in a lot of the sexual misconduct cases, again, that we've seen through Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and R. Kelly and Puff Daddy. Lots of people, even Bill Cosby, I think they've done. There's all sorts of new laws and exceptions in place with reach back way before even sometimes the statute of limitations is passed on some of these. Just jump in if you have anything to say. I'm just going to keep reading through this. One of his former employees, Rodney Little Rod Jones, that you mentioned before, filed a lawsuit accusing him of sexual assault leading to a widespread and dangerous criminal sex trafficking organization. The suit was filed in federal court in New York. Combs' attorneys denied the allegations, calling the claims lies. So a common theme here, they're going through, they are calling everything lies, and they're taking shots. His reckless name dropping.
Also, well, Gary, go ahead, and then go ahead.
His reckless name dropping, talking about Jones, about events that are pure fiction and simply did not happen, is nothing more than a transparent attempt to garner headlines. We have overwhelming, indisputable proof that his claims are complete lies, Diddy's attorney said.
In this, and he does name a lot of names in his lawsuits, including bishops in the church that he says Combs uses to dupe people. That guy, Paul, who was arrested at the Opa-locka airport, he was named in Jones's suit we mentioned before because Jones said that Jones and Paul were used to carry the drugs and the guns for Combs. A lot of really outrageous things. And you get away with saying those things a lot in lawsuits because a lot of people don't realize that there's an immunity for what you can say something that you file in court, a lawsuit like that, and someone can't sue you for just saying it in a pleading in court. So there's protections. So that's why Jones can get away with saying these things, and a lot of these people can't sue him for saying it.
Well, there are some ways around it, but yeah, generally speaking, the litigation privilege is there and immunity is there. What I think is interesting, and Brooklyn Basement said, would you go over some of the Jones suit with us? Not today. We'll see. If you guys want us to go over some of these lawsuits, let me know in the comments and let me know by hitting that like button. We got almost 10,000 likes on the last video. If we can get to 10,000 likes on this video, then we will check out the Jones lawsuit. I know there's only 5,000 or 6,000 people in here, but even the people that watch after, hit that like button and we'll take a look at it. Lisa H said, if you settle in a civil case, can you be required to testify in a federal court about the same thing?
Yes, as long as it's not criminal. Yeah, you can be required in a civil federal court. But
no, I'm talking about even federal criminal court. Yes, not you as the criminal defendant, but the witness.
Oh, okay.
Like witnesses or victims can still testify, even if there's a non-disclosure or confidentiality agreement with the settlement. And we broke this down more in depth in yesterday's video. But yes,
I guess
you can still be forced to testify in these criminal proceedings, even if Diddy settled your lawsuit with you as the victim and you signed a confidentiality agreement.
I guess I just presume defendants because that's the way I think. So.
Right. Defendants, no, you can't be forced. If you settle in a civil case, you can't be forced to speak in your own criminal case. You still have a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. Nancy said, I'm still not clear how the feds get involved based on a civil matter. Can you explain that? So what he means is based on the allegations in the civil complaint, they're quasi-criminal, which means they're making these allegations of abuse and misconduct and trafficking. And all of those things are also criminal. So civilly speaking, individuals can make these civil lawsuits, file these claims without government involvement. But for law enforcement to actually raid a house, make an arrest, for the government to prosecute and throw somebody in jail, that has to be their decision. And what his defense attorneys are saying is the government is making their criminal decisions based on a civil lawsuit filed by civil plaintiffs, attorneys, and civil victims. So that's what he means. He's basing it on the allegations there, not that the feds are getting involved in a civil lawsuit. According to the suit, they talk about, being very flirtatious. Oh, this other thing I want to bring up with this. It's pure fiction and simply did not happen, and they can prove that it's lies, right? So that's why it's a big deal that this guy got arrested with drugs on him when the lawsuit said he was a guy that, carried drugs for P. Diddy. It's starting to give credence. And the same thing of what you mentioned before. They're doing these raids based on the civil complaints. So they're obviously, the law enforcement doesn't think they're complete lies and that they're easily indisputable proof proving that they're lies, right?
Right.
They talk about some of the facts here that you can see on the screen if you want to read them. So here we go. In December, Combs, is Puff Daddy, denied all the claims and all the suits. Enough is enough. For the past couple weeks, I have sat silently and watched people try to assassinate my character, destroy my reputation and my legacy. Sickening allegations have been made against me by individuals looking for a quick payday. So he agrees they're sickening. Let me be absolutely clear. I did not do any of the awful things being alleged. I will fight for my name, my family, and for the truth. Do you find anything interesting about that statement?
No, I mean, it's a standard statement. Now, the thing that I wonder about, and I wonder what's going to come out, is any other family involvement. By specifically mentioning his family, I wonder if there's any family involvement in any of this.
Okay, let's hit a couple questions here. John said, do you think Diddy fled since his attorneys had an idea the search was coming sooner than later?
I don't think he fled. And the fact that we've got video of him walking around the Opa-locka airport in Miami, and law enforcement was there at the airport, I don't think he was fleeing. And in fact, I don't think there's any evidence that he's out of the country.
K-Pick said, what's the difference between federal civil and regular civil? How does a lawsuit go federal? So it's just purely the court that it's in based on a diversity of jurisdiction. If you sue somebody that lives in another state and you're in this state, and it has to be claims over a certain amount of money, sometimes dealing with a federal question. But what we're talking about here mostly is federal criminal stuff, because that is what's happening. The feds are investigating him. This would probably be a federal indictment if one does come down. So when we say federal, most of the time, we're talking about the criminal case. Shy Gal, Papa T, if they go RICO, won't there be many other defendants? And do you think more big names will be sought out?
I think if they go RICO, there's going to be a lot of defendants. I think the purpose of them going to RICO would be to cast a wide net and bring as many people into this as they can, not just to go after his assets. So I think you're going to hear about a lot of other names coming up, especially if they go RICO.
Yeah, I mean, at least sometimes they'll offer immunity to people in RICO too to come testify against the big fish or the boss or things like that. So that would be really interesting too. People protecting their own butts.
And let's face it, you've got an individual here who has contacts with the biggest of the big. He knows everybody. He hangs out with everybody. He has a good time with everybody. They like being seen with him. So, there's bound to be some big names involved.
Exactly. And especially if you look, a lot of these people that get into the game, especially we're talking R. Kelly, P. Diddy, are really young. And so if they were involved in this when they were young and now they've come out of it and they're a successful entertainer or rapper, singer, whatever. And I mean, I think the feds would be more likely to give them immunity to come testify against him when they were kind of brought in by Puff Daddy and brought up and told this was the only way to get here. And now they can come and testify against him because he was the one kind of creating this cycle and running them through it.
Yeah, I don't know if it was Jones's lawsuit, but one of these lawsuits mentions Prince Harry as a person or a friend of Diddy. So, I mean, there's going to be big names.
Okay, so a member of Combs' circle arrested on drug charges. So 25-year-old man is part of Combs' circle, was arrested on drug charges in the airport. We talked about this a little bit. Paul, a former Syracuse University basketball player, I didn't know that, was charged with possession of cocaine and marijuana-laced candy. So it's like edibles. Miami-Dade police officers said the drugs were found inside his personal travel bag. Paul spent the night at Turner Guilford Knight Correctional Center and bonded out Tuesday morning. I wonder how he bonded out. According to the Miami-Dade clerk of court and comptroller, Paul's arraignment hearing is scheduled for April 24th at 9 a.m.
Yeah, it was only $2,500.
Oh, really? So, I mean, that shows you, first off, how unimportant that is, how not a big deal this possession of cocaine and marijuana-laced candy is. But if Diddy's lawyers are really trying to point to a concerted effort by the media and law enforcement to paint this picture and have the public rush to judgment, this is a good piece for them, right? We've already talked about these connections and how it makes him look bad. And if we're talking RICO and he gets the generally bad guy stuff piled on top of him.
You know, this could be the beginning of a cooperation of Mr. Paul against Diddy. We may just see the beginning of this here.
And because how would they do that, right? Now that they have charges, what would a federal prosecutor do when they call Paul in and say, hey, bud, you're looking at some jail time here?
Well, the best thing about this is, and I guess people don't realize this, you don't need to call Paul in now. Paul's going to have a lawyer. And now the assistant U.S. attorney can pick up the phone and call a lawyer who hopefully knows what they're doing, and say to him, hey, look, we got a deal for your guy, but your guy needs to flip and give us some testimony. The other thing you got to watch for, though, as an assistant U.S. attorney, is where's the money coming from that pays Paul's lawyer? If it's coming from Diddy, then you have the ability to go into court and do an ex parte hearing with a judge saying, Judge, we want to talk to this guy, Paul, but we can't talk to him because Diddy's paying his lawyer, and ask the judge actually to appoint an independent lawyer for you to go through to talk to Paul so that you can go around Diddy's paid lawyer.
And that's a whole other weird kind of situation because, you know, you're right to a counsel of your choice if you're paying, and it brings in all these other things. I really think that P. Diddy is going to have a wider reach and more control and power over all these people, witnesses, everybody.
He's going to pay for everybody's lawyers. He's paying for everybody's lawyers. I bet you dollars to donuts.
So I'm sure the thought is we all stick together. We have a better chance of getting out of here. But this is not unusual. This is what it looks like.
There is an old saying: nobody talks, everybody walks. And so, you know, that's the situation. They're all going to be, you know, keeping their mouths shut.
Right. But this is what it looks like when they start charging people on the outskirts to try to get information. And you start with charges you have them on right now, which are these cocaine and marijuana charges. You talk about charges that could be coming in the future in connection with RICO. And what did he do for Puff Daddy? What are we going to find? Are we going to have more charges against you in the future? And if you can make all of these go away, the pressure starts to build. And this is how federal prosecutors do it. And they have so much more power and reach with the federal government, Homeland Security, FBI, than most state attorneys and state prosecutors and state law enforcement has. Combs' name is not mentioned in Paul's arrest affidavit. So everybody's making this connection. Everybody's saying he's part of his circle, Combs' circle. But how do they know that? What does this have anything to do with P. Diddy? And that's the media already running with it. Paul is referenced in Jones's lawsuit and other co-defendants, but Jones did not bring any claims against Paul. Jones's complaint describes Paul as Mr. Combs' mule who acquires and distributes Mr. Combs' drugs and guns. And guess what? Where does that give some credence? Well, we know he has drugs on him, at least at the airport, which is pretty dumb to have drugs on you at the airport, but there you go.
Well, keep in mind, private plane, they don't have to go through security. They don't have to do any of that stuff. They just got out of their cars and walked directly onto the plane. If law enforcement wasn't there, they just get on the plane and they take off.
They're just used to a different life than I am, I guess.
Right. Yeah, they don't have to go through any security.
And here's the last comment here made by his lawyer. We do not plan on trying this case in the media. All issues will be dealt with in court. What do you think about that?
Well, that's a smart thing for Paul's lawyer to say. To keep it on the down low, to keep Paul's name out of the press, and to keep things quiet.
Yeah, and I mean, really, Puff Daddy should want to try to do that too, because all of this stuff is so it just looks and sounds so bad. It's so hard not to hate somebody that you would think did something like this, which is why the presumption of innocence is so important, and why, as we go through this process, there's no charges, there's no arrest. It sure seems like one's coming, but we have to wait to see what they actually found. And we may find out some of it, we may not find out others, because a lot of federal stuff can be a lot more confidential than state stuff, including and not limited to no cameras in the courtroom, right? Right? Why do federal cases? So anybody that hasn't followed a federal case with us, there will not be cameras in the courtroom for these hearings. There will not be cameras in the courtroom for this trial if we get there. Why? Why are there no cameras in federal courtrooms?
Well, because years ago they decided that they're a distraction, and they take away from what the focus is in that courtroom, and they turn it into a media circus. They tried just recently to change that rule, and they lost the vote. So the Supreme Court makes the rules for these federal trials, and the Supreme Court's decided no cameras. That's why you see in federal cases, you see all these beautiful drawings that these artists do of the case and the defendants and what's going on, because all they can do is have artists in there because they can't have cameras.
And I think also a big part of it is federal judges are appointed for life. So they are less likely to care if people in the community are mad that stuff's not live streamed or people want to watch or whatever it is, because they're sitting up there for life. They don't want to be bothered with all the shenanigans that cameras can bring on cases that we've heard people complain about in other cases we're covering here on YouTube.
Right.
Azam said, "Hi, Peter and Big George. I'm too sleepy to pay attention. Rewatch later. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. Mr. Tragos, get well soon." Peter, thank you, Azam, and sleep good. Yala, if Diddy tries to get everyone on the same page, is that witness intimidation? More charges? No? What do you think?
Well, it depends on how he tries. If he has three guys go up and say, "Look, we're gonna, beat your head in unless you change your testimony," yeah, that's an additional charge. Frankly, the smartest thing to do right now to avoid any appearance like that or a chance of getting a charge is stay away from the witnesses. Don't talk to them. And that could have been a reason for this search warrant, by the way. It's something we really haven't discussed. Is it could be a reason, say, a warning: stay away from the witnesses. You're under investigation. Don't try to intimidate anybody, because Jones, in his lawsuit, says that P. Diddy sends agents out to try to intimidate witnesses and intimidate him. It could be that the government is sending a message here with these search warrants that, you better stay clean and you better stay straight and narrow and not try to intimidate any of our witnesses, not try to intimidate any of these people that have filed lawsuits against you. Otherwise, we're coming after you. This just could have been a warning shot.
No Strays said, if I was a juror, I would ask myself, why would Diddy need to sell drugs and guns? He's a billionaire. What's interesting about this is some of the allegations, as you read through some of this, is the drugs and guns, especially the drugs, are part of kind of like the party culture too, of having these big entertainer parties, rapper parties. This is what you need to do to get into the industry, to get big. I make stars come here, maybe even politicians or other influential people, and him having the drugs or firearms or whatever it may be is all part of the persona and what helped him build this huge business conglomerate. Those are some of the allegations. But I do think that there's two ways to look at this. I do think there's going to be people that love P. Diddy, and I think it's worse for him now that we have the Bill Cosbys and the R. Kellys and the Harvey Weinsteins and Jeffrey Epsteins of the world, that people know this is real, this exists. The whole celebrity, Hollywood, horrible things that happen there. I think it's much more likely they believe it now than they did maybe 20 years ago. Yeah. But I do think there are going to be a lot of people to be like, why would he need to do this? He's rich, he's successful, he has a family. All of these people want to come at him because he is successful and they're all jealous of him. So I do think there's going to be kind of multiple ways to look at this. And how hard is it picking a jury in a case like this?
It's going to be really tough, because I think people are starting to think that there's a culture in the entertainment industry. And I think that people they once idolized, look at Bill Cosby. I mean, come on. Was he everybody's dad or
America's
what?
dad and America's grandpa. It's crazy.
I know. I mean, so I think they're starting to realize that maybe there's a facade, a fake facade in front of this entertainment industry, and that the entertainment industry really is rotten inside and has a cultural problem. And I think people are starting to think that. And I think jurors are not giving those people the presumption that they once gave them.
Caitlin says, that's like asking a rich person why they still work. They still want to accumulate money and power. I definitely think a lot of this had to do with power and influence.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. I think we have hit all of the questions. Any other comments you have at this point about the raid, about the comments by the lawyers? We talked about where we think we go from here. Arraignment. Do you expect anything to happen between now and April 24th, the arraignment for this Mr. Paul?
No, I don't think so. I think you're going to probably hear more from Diddy's lawyer. Here, he's going to probably make a little more public pronouncements. I think they are going to try to use the press. He's so high profile that you can't avoid it. So if there's going to be a story every day in the press about it, you might as well try to control the narrative. So I think his lawyer will try to control the press. You're going to hear some releases. You might see Mr. Combs kissing some babies and giving some charitable contributions here in the near future, because I really think they're going to probably try to improve his image. At least that's what I would do, because I think the indictment, if it's coming, is a little ways off. So I think you have time to improve his image.
Yeah, I don't know, though. Judging off what he's doing, publicly with some of these companies selling off parts, I don't know if any babies are going to get close enough for him to kiss them. And I don't know if people are going to want to be involved with him at all. So we'll see what happens. Thanks for coming on, Dad. Thanks, everybody, for showing up, bringing your questions, digging into this stuff. If more stuff comes up, we'll talk about it. And again, hit the like button if you want us to break down that Rod Jones complaint. If we get to 10,000 likes, we will check it out and dive in, because it's pretty gruesome. And a lot of details and names dropped in there. So maybe
there's a lot of stuff in that complaint.
What?
Really? There's a lot of stuff in that complaint. I really found that complaint interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty wild. So maybe we'll check it out either way. But hit that like button, guys. Subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit that alert bell so you get alerted anytime we do a video. And if you're just here for Diddy, let me know. And when we do a video, you will get alerted. I appreciate you guys so much for being here. Until next time, we're out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.